used from a first year seminar is survival. And the different aspects we're looking at is individual survival, group survival, firm survival, which is a little bit of business part, and then art survival. And at first I thought maybe they all survived the same way, but as we've looked at it, art kind of doesn't survive the same way as the other three, because in the other three you make choices on how you survive, and then people have to decide how art survives. It's kind of the philosophy we've used about it. So that's kind of the survival. It's not basically the idea of teaching them how to rub sticks together and start a fire, but it's more on the idea of how to actually plan for the future and think about how you're going to survive through your life. So that's what we've been doing. Things that came to my mind with survival were there's a lot on the Doomsday Preppers. There's the Doomsday Castle. They thought of an apocalypse. All these different items factored into it. And then with what's going on in the political right now with the government, and we actually got to bring that in if there was a government shutdown. Well, there was a government shutdown, but if they actually didn't increase the debt ceiling, then we would have a problem where money, the government defaults, there may be a problem with what money value would be if there's inflation, things of that nature. So that will allow us the opportunity to look at if money had no value, how would you survive? What would you buy? How would you be able to buy anything? How would you survive? So all those factors have helped. The new project that we just started this week is we're doing an art survival project. And I've called it, or I've used it off the, if you've seen the TV show Flea Market Flip, where they take an old item and then repurpose it. And that's what we're using right now. And the students seem to love the idea of that. And they were really excited. Now there was a few that said they're not creative and they're scared to death about it, but for the majority of them they said that they thought it would be fun, and that's why I think it's going to be successful in the class. A lot of them came into class with this preconceived notion of how they were going to survive and what they were going to do, and as the book that we're using is on survival, and as we go through and look at the different aspects, they realize that they didn't have enough information before, and there's more specific information. For example, one time we were looking at how to preserve water, or how to filter water, and most of them thought, well, okay, I know what to do, and basically none of them had an idea of what to do. And so then we had to get the information on how to make sure it was safe to drink, and all the different filters and things you had to go through to make it safe, and really is what we're drinking now safe. So we did that part, and then actually thinking about survival and how they're going to survive if we'd have an EMP or something like that would take place. It made them think critically about how they're going to survive, not only from a day-to-day basis, but from a yearly basis. So I think it hits multiple parts of it. I'm an outdoorsman, and I like the idea of survival, and I've thought different times about if we had an issue where it would be if one of these would actually happen, like if we had a financial crisis or things of that nature. And then when we were in FYS class, we had one of the other faculty members come in and talk about his class where he does something with the apocalypse, and that kind of led me to start thinking along these lines, and that kind of spiraled into this. Well, I thought that since I'm going to have a lot of different majors in the class, or different philosophies in the class, that I didn't want to just focus on my discipline, which was business, which is what I know. Art, I don't know a lot about, and I mean, I collect antiques and advertising and stuff like that, so I have a little bit of knowledge about it, but I'm not, that knowledgeable about it. So I thought this will help me grow, but it'll also help them and show that it's not just one discipline based, so we can go across disciplines. So I thought that's why art helped a lot, and it gave a different avenue or a different aspect to look at in regards to survival. Well, maybe you don't normally think. I noticed that from teaching business students that we all seem to have the same business mind, but when you get into a classroom where there's different majors, there's a lot of different ideas, and that's not a bad thing to have different ideas, because that's what makes the world go around, so to speak. So it's good to have all the different thoughts, and it also helps for discussion, because when we're in a business class and all the students have the same mindset, then there's not much of a discussion unless you have one that has a completely different view. But in this one you have multiple views, so they all work together. First, I think is find a theme that fits you, but also a theme that will engage the students. And I think that's the part of mine. The first couple of days were very difficult with the students, because it was just, going through the syllabus, going through the introduction parts. But once we actually got into the theme and actually got into studying the book and looking at the different parts of it, they started engaged, started speaking. I've actually had students that are talking about now, they went home and talked to their parents about survival plans. They've actually developed their meals, their meal plans, and they're doing planning for a survival situation. So it's interesting to know that they've actually took it and applied it to their life. And if you do something like that will engage the students and they're thinking about it, I think that's going to help bring the other parts out too. And that's what's been successful, I think, in our class so far. Good luck.
I chose was a legal focus, and it's actually allowed me to include all of the different domains within that focus. And so it was really something that I wanted to explore. I do teach a legal communication course, and this is a much more abbreviated form and looking at a lot of different types of things. And I think probably the main interest, just like everyone else, is I like those CSI shows and all that, and the students seem to too. And so I was able to actually integrate all of the different areas. At everything from artistic thinking, we've looked at things like Charles Manson and his music, which is actually quite amazing if you get a chance to look at. We've looked at Hitler and his paintings and drawings. The person that's believed to be Jack the Ripper actually was also a painter, and so we've looked at some of his paintings as well. So we've kind of pulled that in. When we look at the science, this is probably one of the areas they enjoy the most. We do a lot of the CSI. We go to the crime scene house. We have put together a lot of different things like cases that have been misanalyzed. The data's there, the evidence is good, but how they've actually been analyzed. So we've done that. Students will actually take a fairly well-known legal case, I guess, and they will either take prosecution or defense. And then from that, they actually do a legal brief with the partner. They then follow through with the presentation. We've had some great presentations this term. I'm really excited about that. But some of the cases we've done Scott Peterson, we've done Robert Blake, we've done Sam Shepard, we've done Cynthia Joy at the prosecutor's fallacy, which is using statistics poorly. And one of the famous cases is Peoples versus Collins, and it was where they actually determined probabilities, and they simply multiplied all the probabilities and said this person must be guilty. And so
had, the former learning domains which have, kind of translation into the new learning outcomes. Information literacy is definitely present, I think, in all that you do, inquiry-based thinking.
And even the metacognitive thinking,
yes.
Because it's amazing, they're almost more concerned with winning their case than they are actually the grade they get. And so for the presentations, the way that we've set it up is that we have a first prosecution partner that will not only go over their case, but also anticipate what the defense will say, then first defense partner, then second prosecutor, and then second defense partner. But after the presentations are complete, the class serves as the jury. And during that time, they're also making comments about their presentation as well as comments about the case and why they thought one particular side won versus the other. And it's amazing how excited they get about whether they're going to win the case or not. Oh, why? That's not right. And then we talk about those of you that voted guilty or those of you that voted not guilty. We do use the exercise where they've been offered a job in Saudi Arabia, and the job actually, they have to figure out how much, but it's about $75,000. But prior to that exercise, we talk about the culture of Saudi Arabia. And we actually start out with how would you like to live in a country with almost no crime, where you could walk at night and not be afraid, not ever lock your doors. And they get really excited about that. Oh, yes. I said, what would you pay for that? And one of the young students said, one of the women in the class said, I'd give you my little sister. So again, they kind of have some fun with that. But then we go into that exercise. We have a speaker on Sharia law, so we've kind of mixed that with the multicultural. I love the course. I'd say that, and I don't want my department to know, but it's one of my favorite courses to teach. I just absolutely love it. And a lot of that's the theme, because I find that after teaching public speaking and fundamentals of communication and all of these other courses, the student will get up and they will give a speech because they have to give a speech. In this case, I'm giving them a theme and something they can get excited about. And so the research that they will put into these cases, looking at where to find the citations, the actual case, what the newspaper said, if they can find any exhibits, they have to in their briefs, they have to determine not just their arguments, but what they anticipate the other side will be and how they would respond to those arguments. So all of a sudden, instead of just teaching a concept, you're applying it to something they can get excited about, and obviously I can get excited about too. So again, it's been a great class. Every semester I make a few changes to it. The crime scene house, where they actually are looking at blood spatter and fingerprinting themselves, things like that has always been a big highlight in the course. But it's amazing how much they actually get excited about the course and actually engage. I don't know that I've had a single course of first-year seminar that hasn't. And they're there, they don't miss classes, they want to know what's going to happen next. Whether we're looking at cases where we have, and again, it's not all just a case type of situation. It's not a real boring, I have a lot of visuals, a lot of the PowerPoints, all of my PowerPoints and such are out online, so they will see video clips of what a coroner has said, or they might see video clips of a crime scene and what are we looking for. It's all based on critical thinking. It's really based on how to see things from different directions, how to see, again, whether I'm prosecution, what's the defense going to say? If I'm defense, what's the prosecution going to say? Why would a scientist have seen this when someone else sees this? So it's a constant evolving of seeing things more than just what I might say, but actually asking questions and what do you think of that? I don't think there's anything that's as important as coming up with something that the instructor loves, the instructor's interested in, that the instructor doesn't mind spending hours on the internet finding supplemental material, because that's really what makes the class a lot of fun. I don't have to find a textbook and then follow the textbook or do anything that I wouldn't have wanted to do in the textbook, but they have a chapter on it. Rather, I can find things and develop it that will actually increase the understanding. And if the class decides we're going to spend more time on something that they're really excited about, we spend more time on it. We're not as drawn. Not to say that we don't have quite a bit of structure in the syllabus, and I give them the whole class in advance in terms of what we'll cover, but we're always making changes. I just received an email today from a student, and I had put some comments on her exam, actually, and the exams are short essays. Also, application to concepts, to different things, and she said, "You just made my day." She said, I just can't, I'm so excited, and I'm thinking now of going to law school. Wow. I had a student call me that I had the second semester I taught here. It's been 3 years. He no longer is at Marshall, and he said, I've been thinking a lot. You said something to me during the class. And I was just wondering what you meant. You may not remember, and I thought 3 years ago, I barely remember yesterday. So anyhow, and I said, well, I'm sure if you said this, what I was referring to is the fact that you probably would do really well in law school. He said, well, I thought that's what you meant, and I'm really considering it now. So again, that happens all the time. I wish I was in law school, not communication studies, but no, you do. You do have a chance to somewhat impact where students go with their lives. There's no doubt about that. So I had students that have come in undecided, decided they're going to go into forensics. We've had students that have come in undecided, and they may like the science aspect, or we talk about art. Again, you never know exactly where they're going to take that focus, but they really get excited about it, and I think choosing that theme is so important. It's got to be something that you're going to enjoy. When I started out, I have a slight background in art. I have very little background in science, very little in history, although I love it. So all of these things were a chance for me to put everything together too, and to spend time researching things I'm interested in, and then sharing those, which I think is what teaching is all about. It doesn't have to be something that you're teaching. A lot of times people think that if I'm a history professor, it has to be a theme around history, or it has to be a theme if I'm in nursing, and that isn't the case at all. I think it could be on anything. I know we've had some people do service learning. We've had people do, again, they can be hobbies. They can be things that you really have an interest in. I mean, I'm thinking maybe I need to do one on cats and dogs or something. I mean, it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be the academic discipline. In my case, what I'm teaching overlaps very slightly with the legal communication course, but even that course I teach it every other year, so it's not like it's something that it's really not my major discipline, but it's something I'm very interested in.
The theme for my class is engineering disasters, and that probably simplifies it and over and understates it all at the same time. But it's really about engineering failures and the human factors involved with that, all of the dilemmas involved and decisions involved leading up to the actual disaster or event, and then what happens afterwards. There are a variety of human factors involved with that too. How everyone reacted to the failure. Did any innovation come out of the failure? Was there anything that could be gleaned from the failure? Lessons learned, that sort of thing. In the semester-long, at that time we were doing a semester-long class to learn how to teach freshman year seminar, and we were toying with themes. We were throwing themes out to each other about our particular disciplines, and I was struggling somewhat, trying to think about how can I make an engineering theme still interesting to a diverse group that's multidisciplinary. And I had several ideas. Innovation is a pet topic of mine, and I was focusing on that. And actually, some of the people in the class said, well, what they think is the most interesting when they think of engineering, they see on television. And unfortunately, perhaps, a lot of what you see on television involving engineering is when something's gone wrong, right? And everyone's interested in what went wrong. What, could it have been prevented? How can we prevent it next time? I really started thinking about that and how that theme related to freshmen, and the fact that a big part of their success in life will be how they react to failure, because most people confront failure many more times than they confront success. Even wildly successful people will tell you they failed many more times than they've succeeded. So I thought, I think I can make that work. And I think when you look at different engineering failures that have happened, and it has turned out this way, luckily. I wasn't sure until the first time I taught the course, but it really turns out there are so many different aspects to an engineering failure besides the math and the engineering of it. In fact, it's usually something not to do at all with that. That they can all have a part to play and become involved in it and involved in the discussion, whether it's the factors leading up to it, and then more importantly, what was the result of it? Did we learn anything from that? And eventually, that's really what I hope I leave them with in the course. I actually have enjoyed doing that, because I think what makes our disciplinary studies interesting, even at a higher level, is looking at the bigger picture and the broader picture and how different people are involved in it. And a lot of what we do in engineering is teaching our engineering students how to deal with teams and people that were trained and educated differently than them. So I found that that's been a good experience for me, to look through it with kind of a different lens. Now, with respect to metacognitive and integrative thinking, obviously the integrative part is, and I'll talk about some of the exercises in particular, is almost any of these big events that you can think about that you've seen on the news involve people from a wide variety of disciplines, both leading up to the incident and then always after the incident. Trying to get them to come at some of the issues, some of the exercises we do, and assume their future identity of what they think they want to be or do as a career, and think about it that way, and then discuss it so that they're all putting their own ideas and their own perspectives out there, and that's been interesting. They'll have 25 different answers to the question. Go back and become a Monday morning quarterback and look at decisions people made and why they made them and what their thinking pattern was. And surprisingly, this is something I've learned, they've fallen into identifiable patterns that we've read about in our book and other sources. I've started out the semester, since it's kind of the anniversary of Katrina, we kind of start out with that one, just looking at that. And And from there, going on to looking at the country's infrastructure and the fact that it's worn out. And, I give them a variety of things to read about that. And let them know as I'm doing it that I have my own bias. I'm a civil engineer. I think the country's infrastructure is worn out, and I think it would be great if we could replace it all. But that's my civil engineering bias. So we look at that, and then the really major assignment they do at the end is, by that time, it's almost the anniversary of 9/11. And so we watch a video that Nova made, and it's actually freely available on Nova's website, and it's called Engineering Ground Zero, and it's about the team of people, architects, engineers, and other people that provided financing, the mayor, all these people that decided that a new building needed to be built in that site, and there was a lot of controversy about that. And psychological issues, sociological issues, all these sorts of things. And the video follows this team along as they design and build this building that has to be capable of withstanding the impact of a fully loaded aircraft. And that's expensive. And they all went to great lengths to make sure that this was designed better. And the engineering failure part of that, most people might not think of that as an engineering failure, was the fact that no one thought that building would ever collapse. They didn't necessarily design it thinking that it would be hit by an aircraft, but even the day that it happened, engineers were coming on television talking to the news channel saying, oh, it's not going to fall, it can't fall. And so that taught the engineering community a lot about steel and concrete and the analysis of materials. So there's some of that in the video. It's a little bit technical about that, but then there's also the emotional side. They built the fountain and the pond, and the architect that's in the video is very emotional about being involved. And at the end of that, I asked them to think about the video, and then I've given them a variety of other materials, including the country's infrastructure and how expensive that's going to be to fix. And then some articles that have been written about the World Trade Center, some very critical. They're having trouble renting the space out in the new building, for instance, for lots of reasons. And I asked them to pretend that they're practicing the career that they want to practice someday and that they live in New York City. And I asked them to write a letter to the editor of the New York Times explaining why they think the building should have been built or should not have been built. And that's really interesting. As I said, it had 25 different answers to that question. Only in one case, last fall, there was a student that was had been thinking about it, I think, and maybe it would happen to be a female student. And I think, I'm just speculating here, she was not sure. There aren't many women in engineering, and especially civil engineering, and maybe, and I don't know, maybe there was something about her educational process, she wasn't sure what it was. She thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. And I think there was something about all of that that appealed to her, and she changed her major, which was great. But I don't expect any of them to do that. And what I hope to get out of it is this semester I have 2 engineering students and a very widely dispersed group of majors, and they're all across the board. But they relate to each other remarkably well. It's been an enriching experience for me. Sometimes that's the highlight of my day. You know, I am meeting with this group of freshmen, and in my case, I have a son who's a freshman in college too, so it's a little bit of a window into his soul as well, right? Although that's not why I decided to do it. I didn't really think of that, but and it's just interesting to see them. They're all very, they're nervous at first. They have a lot of questions, but I found them to be very giving when it comes to class discussions, or if you have them involved in group discussions. They seem to like to have that opportunity to voice their opinions and their thoughts about that. I think my advice would be inject as much of yourself into the course as you can. Don't be afraid. I think we're all afraid sometimes to get out there on the fringes and really put ourselves out there and put ourselves into a course sometimes. I've found that the more I do that, the better it is. Whether it's just a day or a lesson that we're covering or whatever. And it's tough to do in this course too, because to some of us the boundaries are gray compared to what we're used to, and there's a little bit of the unknown. The other advice I would offer is that certainly the first time you do it, you're looking at your schedule for the semester, and there are a lot of blanks on it at first, and you have to get creative with that. And it's surprising. I've been surprised. There have been times when I think, wow, this assignment was hastily conceived, it was ill-conceived, and they'll hate it. And they didn't. They loved it. So you just never know, and I think you have to do some experimentation on the front end. And like any course, it probably takes a few times until you feel like you get it right.